getting to the heart of the action as it is happening. You've got only 3 hours left to trade these bellwethers. We're talking Intel and JP Morgan. They're out with results after the bell, and tomorrow morning their results, of course, will ripple through your financial and tech trades tomorrow. So let's get you set up. Let's get to the word on the street right now. Your Fast Money crew today: the Negotiator, Guy Adami, Jeff Tomasulo of SMB Capital, Dr. J, John Nadarian of OptionMonster.com, and Eugene Profit from Profit Funds. Negotiator, I know you're looking at Intel. I know you're sniffing around. It's at a 52-week high right now. A lot of analysts on the street are giddy about this, but what are you expecting? Seems like they have to walk on water in order for this stock to trade higher post-results.
Yeah, I mean, I have no doubt the quarter's going to be great. I mean, everything leading up to it indicates it's going to be a fantastic quarter. And given what they're supposed to earn next year, Intel is cheap. My concern about Intel is it has not performed with the rest of the space since October, frankly. This is the first time since making up a 52-week high back in October that it's tested it. And you got to wonder if it's lagging, is it telling you something? And I think, you know, the quarter will be great. I just wonder about the sustainability. That is a great point in terms of the trade on Intel. 21 has always seemed to be resistance, whereas on the Philadelphia Semiconductor Index, we saw that breakout in early December, breaking through that 337 level. Dr. J, what is the setup in the options pitch when it comes to Intel or the rest of the chip sector?
Well, just I want to give a tip of the hat to Guy Adami real quick, because when Intel had those blowout earnings and the stock popped, he said, look at the 160 million share turnover that day. It rolled over. I think Intel has made a mirror move on this move into these earnings. Love the stock. I think it trades sideways after the earnings. Much rather own Marvell. But so far today, Melissa, 3 times the number of calls trading versus puts. Wow. And those calls are being bought on the offer rather aggressively.
Tom Sulo.
And Melissa, you got to keep in mind, and I agree with Guy, I agree with John, is that risk reward. We're at 52-week highs. I mean, they could blow out their earnings and they can knock this stock down. So risk reward, I think price really matters here, and you got to be very careful about going in there.
So as a trader, Tom Sulo, where else are you going? I mean, if you see the trade in Intel here, what's the trade here if you believe that Intel has to knock the cover off the ball to even move an inch higher tomorrow morning?
Well, I think if they blow the cover off the ball, you got to look at technology. Technology's been a leader going forward. So you look at the ETFs, look at the Qs, look at the other ETFs that mimic like the SMH. Those are the ways you can play the industry as a whole.
Eugene Profit, with the best name in the business, over at Profit Funds. You take a look at a good report out of Intel, and what then do you surmise about the rest of the sector? We did get some data out of Gartner and IDC today saying that Dell is losing share last year to its rivals like HP and IBM, which, by the way, are higher today.
Right. I think that's Dell specific, Melissa, and I think that you got to look at Intel to see if the margins are above 60. As Guy said, Intel has not participated, and yet you know most PCs are 4 to 5 years old. So with the technology cycle coming kind of long in the tooth, I think Intel's earnings will be strong, and I think it's a stock you can buy even if it goes sideways for a short period of time.
You're willing to step
Gene is the man. Hey, Mel, can I jump in here, Mel? How you doing?
Hey.
Listen, I got a tech trade for you. You know, the one that flies on everybody's radar screen that I think is the best run company out there is Hewlett-Packard at 11 times forward earnings. That just goes up every day consistently. That continues to trade well, continues to perform. Mark Hurd's a stud, I think, on valuation alone. And if you believe in the whole PC thing, Hewlett-Packard's a much better play than the rest of these
Let me ask you this
suckers.
question. You mentioned 11 times forward earnings, which is exactly what Intel is trading. 11 times 2010 earnings, Guy, minus the cash. What's the difference between Intel and Hewlett-Packard?
Good point. I think Hewlett-Packard's much more diversified. Frankly, I think they got their hands in a lot more businesses currently than Intel. I think Intel's probably a little top-heavy in terms of what they're exposed to. That's why I'd rather be an HPQ right now.
I think that was a trade school, Guy. Let's move on to the next story, and of course that is JP Morgan. First major bank to report tomorrow morning. You've got a few hours left to place your bets on this one. Let's take your position here, and of course, you know, the talk today is focused around that bank tax that's being levied, although a couple firms on the street, KBW, Keefe Bruyette, as well as FBR, saying that this is unlikely to pass the Senate. Not sure if this will, in fact, be an overhang. Eugene Profit, what do you like? Do you like these bank stocks here?
Well, I own JP Morgan. I also own Goldman Sachs. I think there's a little bit more penalty on Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan. If you go back to last quarter, JP Morgan had really strong earnings, and yet the stock went down over the next few weeks. So you might see the same thing here. You might see strong earnings come through, but the stock goes sideways.
Tom Sulo, how are you trading this?
Well, I agree. Again, as a short-term intermediate trader, again, there's too much risk to really, like you said in the beginning of this conversation, a bet. I don't want to take a bet. I want to make money. So I'm going to sit on the sidelines. But if JP Morgan really goes above $45 level, we can see 52-week highs.
So 45, a break above 45. and will go to new highs.
Exactly.
All right, let's talk about this discussion about this bank tax, because, yeah, you know, when you break it down, it doesn't really amount to much when it's per share and you break it down amongst the banks over 10 or 12 years. But let's take a look at what this means. If this passes, does this give the administration and Congress a little bit more fodder to pass the too large, too big to fail? And does that hurt the big banks? Because that is the way the market is trading today. The big banks aren't performing as well as some of the smaller regional banks out there. Guy, what do you say?
Yeah, I think it's the cornerstones of all those things. And then you wonder at what point do they levy a tax on the Exxon Mobils of the world who say, to them, you know what, these guys are making much too much money. You know, at what point do they stop? I mean, I just think this opens a door that once you go through, you can't go back out of. And it should scare folks. Frankly, it scares me.
All right, and Dr. J, your thoughts on this? I know you're fired up about this.
Matt Nesto nailed it. And I think you take a look at the regional banks, you own those as opposed to the big banks. The regionals are going to not have this monkey on their back, but the big banks are going to pass that right along to the consumers and the commercials. So I don't think it's going to impact them, but I think it holds them back just enough that the regionals catch up, so I'd bet on them instead.
And we should note that on tonight's Fast Money at 5, Payzar Ken Feinberg will weigh in on the billions in new taxes being levied against the nation's biggest financial institutions, the very same banks whose bonuses were determined by the Payzar himself. We'll put him his feet to the fire tonight at 5. Today's market buzzkill, I should say, December retail sales dropping by the largest amount in 27 years, knocking everyone from Amazon to Walmart. Maven of mall stocks, Patty Edwards of Storehouse Partners on the fast line with her trades. Patty, what do you make of these results? It seems like this, to some extent they were baked in based on the same store sales reports that we've been getting in drips and drabs.
They are fairly much baked in at this point, Melissa, but it really is confirming that that middle-range consumer is still hurting. Department stores were down. I think we're going to see more of that. We had some really bad foreclosure data come out this morning. The unemployment wasn't good. And so I think you have to continue to focus on the trade down in retail at this point for the most part. I know Pete has been in love with TJX. I have to agree with that. They're trading at 12.6 times next year's earnings. They've got phenomenal sales. The channel checks that I'm hearing from across the country still continuing to show strength. Same thing for Aeropostale.
Right.
Love that space. That is the teen retailer that is on the bargain end of things. And
Sure.
with these higher gas prices, teenagers aren't going to have as much money to spend.
Hey, Patty, I want to bring in the chart of the day, and that is J. Crew. Guy, you've been all over this one. This stock amazingly has been basically a quadruple over the past year. Its short interest as a percent of its float, very high as well, 26%. You like this one, though, Guy?
And I'm glad Patty took the time to call in all the way from the West Coast. Yeah, if you just check this sucker out, I mean, it's effectively been holding the 50-day moving average basically since the beginning of this year. Sets up for a pretty easy trade there, folks. You know, you continue to own it above the 50-day, a close below the 50-day, you get out. And for those of you that enjoy risk out there, like I know Patty does, you can get shorted on a close below the 50-day moving average.
Patty, you stick with JCG?
Oh, guys. You know, J. Crew has done phenomenal things. You got one of the best merchants in retail behind them. I would continue to be long this one. I agree with you, Guy. I think you got to ride this one. It's doing phenomenally well.
All right, Patty, thanks for checking in. We do appreciate it. Patty Edwards from Storehouse. Let's move on to some options action right now. Dr. J, you're watching call activity in an aerospace name. What is it?
Yeah, and this one's been hot for almost a year. It's doubled in that last year, more than that. In fact, Textron, TXT. Take a look at it, Bell and Sikorsky helicopters and so forth. A lot of unusual activity, but it was January, so I didn't like that. Now they've extended it out into February options. The reason I don't like January is you only have one day to be right. Takeover doesn't happen tonight, you're done. That's why February, I like the play that's setting up now, and I am, in full disclosure, along the stock.
All right, going to take a pause here on tonight's Fast Money. All the after-hours action on Intel, including exclusive interview with the company's CFO before the earnings conference call. Coming up next, Power Lunch goes across America to get reaction to Obama's plan to tax the banks. Halftime continues right after this.
It will rule the street tomorrow. Intel earnings